That was so much better. Episode 2 of Solo Leveling was so much better. Leaps and bounds above the first episode. Like I said, the first episode impressions, it really does feel like there was a reason why they were showing 2 episodes at all the premieres. And that's because I think this is where the good hook is. I think episode 1 is really kind of a here's the world, which isn't that interesting. Whereas episode 2 is here is the writing. Here is the capability of the writer to really do some interesting stuff with, character conflicts and all this kind of stuff. The mechanics of the actual dungeon that they're actually in, which I think is not crazy, but at the same time gives some thought in there. Like, what do you do in this situation? That's where this episode shines. And yes, ultimately coming to the end where you have what seems like the hook. Do you want to join this whole quest? If you don't, you die. I wonder what the choice is, death or I live and possibly get OP. Who knows? I don't really know the full details of where the story goes. I just know that it's all about him leveling up. How he does that, that's the big question mark, and hopefully we'll get more into that with the 3rd episode, but yeah, great episode overall. Let's first talk about the OP and ED. Of course, Sawano Hiroyuki, so the OP is amazing. Animation was really amazing as well. So it kind of has everything going for it for that OP, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. The ED, TK Ling Tosite type of vibes in there, which I'm assuming is actually intended because I think she did music for, or did a cover for it or something like that. I think I've heard her before, but excellent vocalist. The ED's visuals, shrug, like a lot of shrug, CGI environments, shrug, but the song itself is fantastic. But anyways, the episode, I thought, again, really amazing, opening up with pretty much what I was saying. It is so funny because like I mentioned in my first impressions of the first episode, my gosh, the moment that happened, I'd be the one that would be on the ground, like groveling. Like that seems to be the hint is the commandments. And sure enough, they're like, what about those commandments? Oh yeah. Let's do that. Technically, it opens up a song, thanking Sung for the hints, which Sung's like, dude, I just moved reflectively. Again, that's kind of what they established in the first episode, is this idea that Sung is, yeah, he's used to being beat down, so obviously he has a little bit more instincts in what to do when it comes to cowering. When it comes to losing, he knows exactly what to do because he's always losing. But no, this is where it gets into what I thought was like the crafty part of this entire segment, which is the idea of the commandments and how to respond to them. I love the aspect of a dungeon not just being simply you go in there and you bring the blade down on the baddie and the baddie dies and then everybody wins, which is obviously what everybody in this party is used to, which seems like the status quo for going in these dungeons. It's typically go in there, kill boss, and you win. And yes, the bosses get stronger as the rank goes up, and thus you need more powerful weapons to beat the monsters, yada yada yada. This is a situation where they have to think. There's essentially a puzzle in this dungeon, and it has something to do with these commandments. Now, my big question mark and my assumption is going to be at this point is that this has a deeper meaning. Like this statue, these creatures in this room have a deeper meaning. Possibly this big statue is possibly actually a god of this particular world, this dimension, this place they're going to, these dungeons. This might be the god of that world. Which, yes, if it is somehow selected Song as some sort of player, yeah, that can turn into some interesting stuff in the idea of... it actually brings up a lot of conflict here. In the idea of essentially powering up Sung, possibly, to destroy them better. But it could be possibly a thing of there being an alternate dimension here they're going to, where there's different gods that are either playing with the humans or possibly conflicting with each other. And the idea that Sung has now been selected to essentially serve this god and maybe possibly fight other gods. Or again, it could just be all game. You're super weak and I want to see what I could do with you. Let me power you up so that I can see what you do. It basically playing as a puppeteer. But again, that's probably something that we'll find out way later or possibly in the next episode. I mean, they just could come out right out with it and say, yeah, I'm powering you up so that you can defeat this other god, or yeah, let's have fun. Let's see what he does with this ability. But yeah, like I said, really interesting kind of seeing it lay out that way as sort of a mechanic. And it totally plays as that in the idea that, yes, they're all groveling. The statue's pleased. And then it moves into phase 2. Okay, the second commandment. Figure out what that second commandment is. Everybody's panicking. Okay, it is to praise it. So it kind of shifts quickly to, okay, what is praise? This guy even stepping forward and doing a usual prayer, and it's not necessarily what the statue itself is seeking. Again, it is all mechanics. It's not literal praise. It is the mechanics of the praise. Where the first one is really kind of keeping your head down to a certain level. This one is now go to these certain locations. It was kind of interesting, the idea that it's not simply go to one of these statues, because Johei and Song go to the same exact one. And in doing so, that doesn't work. It's only one person at a time. So Sung has to go way over here and lose a foot over it. But again, it kind of shows that craftiness that Sung has. It's not as if it's playing Sung as being a genius, which I kind of like. It is playing it out as he is going on a whim, trying to figure out how to survive. Again, playing into his strength, which is survivability. And obviously, the reason why he's lived this long is because of that the instincts of being weak and surviving. Whereas everybody else, and again, plays into that whole like opening sequence that they had in the first episode. This idea that this Hunter Association leader is pretty much telling people, be cautious. Like don't get ahead of yourself because you're going to end up dead. As they kind of also, I don't think they kind of hinted at it with the first episode. The second episode, they kind of hinted at this idea of like dungeons will always possibly have that one thing in it that can completely turn the tides on you quickly. These monsters that are just unbelievably strong, and you're going to trip up and die. But yeah, Sung being kind of cautious, he's kind of figuring this stuff out on the fly, which I do like. It's not making him out to be a genius. And thankfully, he hasn't really gotten him into the realm of being like a coward or like a whiny coward. Yes, he gets really frustrated at the end of this episode, but he's not really a coward and constantly whining about things. So I think this episode did a lot for me in appreciating Sung as a character. The final segment, which is Believe, I think this is like probably the point in which I was the most like troubled by, because it doesn't really make things too clear. The idea is that they have this altar come up in the middle, and they all have to step in the middle platform. That's how they activate it. And once it's activated, everybody has to watch the statues. Otherwise, they'll start to close in on them. But additionally, the door opens. And this is, I kind of like how they sort of put it out, or at least Sung kind of figures it out, this idea that it is a test of belief. You have this option here, the door is open, and thus it's going to test your belief because you have a way out. Normally, with the idea of a belief or something like that, is you have this thing that you're believing in, but then every now and then you'll have something that comes up that makes you go, you know what? It's actually greener over here. I could possibly leave this and go over here because it looks pretty comfy. And that's what this whole system is playing out. The door's open. That's where you actually want to go, right? So, yes, obviously, people are going to be like, crap, it's open. I'm out of here. Peace out. Later, guys. And they run out the door. It is essentially the platform that's constantly wobbling back and forth. And as people leave, it starts to, weigh one direction. And then thus everybody's going to die. It's a cool thing that they kind of set up there, and having each person kind of running out the door. But Sung brought up something really important, which is the massive part of this belief system, is the idea that, wait, yes, every time somebody leaves, they lose a flame, but the flames are the blue flames are going out. It's a timer. So if we all stay here, we'll all survive. But no, you don't really know that. That's the problem that creates, is we don't really know that. The flames could go out, like I think Song brings up. The flames can go out, and then the door closes. So I'm not going to take that chance. Got to get out of here. And I think it does technically play out that way, because it doesn't really kind of make it clear at the very end. But yes, technically, it does play out that everybody's out of there. Sung is left behind. And as that last flame goes out, a blade comes down on him. Now, I don't know if it is going to be an idea that he is sacrificed on that altar is what triggers it, or did he survive long enough for that last flame to go out? Is it going to be a thing where maybe when they come back in the next episode, the blade was like literally on his nose and the flame went out, so the statue stopped, and thus he passed the test? Or is it simply that he died on that altar? I don't necessarily think that you're going to have like everybody that died in that room is thus, claimed as being believing and thus follow the 3 commandments, because he was the only one that was in the center. He was the one that was always in the center all the way to the end. So it'll be interesting how it plays out. It is kind of a question mark of like how they set up all these mechanics just to test what is qualified as courage of the weak. The one person that was the weakest that stayed behind. It's not really necessarily a sign of weakness, but it is technically a sign of courage. It's like that title doesn't really make that much sense, because yes, it's courage in the idea that he let everybody else go and he was the last one remaining, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's weak. He is weak, but it could have been anybody. I mean, Song even was going to do that. For a brief moment, Song said, you two go. But unfortunately, Johei couldn't move because she used her magic too much. She couldn't take Song with her. So obviously the only two people that are going to be able to leave here is going to be Song and Johei. So I don't know necessarily that weak comes into mind with that whole thing. But it does play into Sung's character, obviously, because he's super weak and he's going to become OP now. Or at least I assume. But yeah, like that prompt is like, you're qualified to be a player. Do you want to do it? If not, you're going to die in 0.02 seconds. Why specifically 0.02 seconds? It's like we calculated it, and if you don't, you're dead. Outside of that, yes, the other folks in the groom, again, I got a huge kick out of the Park thing, constantly flagging him. By the way, he has a child on the way. And then sure enough, when Park brought it up again, I'm like, dude, please stop flagging yourself. And yeah, sure enough, the slice in half. Okay, finally, after, 4 times of flagging him that he has a child on the way, they finally get rid of him. It was great. It is sad that Kim left before Song. Like, you would assume that this guy was a lot better than Song. I got mad respect for Song. S-O-N-G. I know there's probably like a specific pronunciation between the two of them. The leader. I'm just going to call him the leader. I give a little bit more respect for the leader during this whole thing because they did technically confront him about the fact that it was all his fault. Like, well, it was Kim mainly saying that Park's dead because of you. You're the one that just chose this, even though everybody, at least half of them, chose to go into this room. But they were playing off the idea that his losing his arm is, sad to hear it, but that's karma. You're the one that chose this, and thus you get something taken away from you. The commander technically did take responsibility. But I mean, the whole situation in the third commandment is the aspect of, can you stare death in the face for a long time? It is one of those things where I can't really blame anybody for panicking and running out the door, because it is one of those things of like, here is your way out, and right here is death. Why would you choose anything else? Now, massive guts to the first person that decided to run for the door, because again, technically to the commandments itself, it says that you're not going to be able to leave alive. And thus, these people are technically turning against that. Now, the only thing that kind of offsets that rule, my thought process when that happened, when somebody actually made out that door, my thought process was that what's going to happen is in the end, Sung is going to be the only one on that altar. Yes, partly to do with all the key arts and artwork that we see of him bleeding out on top of the altar. We all know how this is going to end. If you don't know that was how this is supposed to end, you're not paying attention to advertising. They have been spoiling this for years. But no, the assumption is that Sung was going to be there. What I thought was going to be, because based on the rule set itself, that you will not leave alive, and thus leaving that altar is you essentially going against that rule. My assumption is that it was going to allow them to go past the door and give the rest of them the idea that they could survive by going past that door. And then what we'll find out later on is possibly after this, Sung accepts this quest. Somehow he ends up out of the dungeon, or maybe he walks out of the dungeon afterwards. Or maybe as he's leaving the dungeon, we come to find out that yes, everybody that went through that door died. Like they got past the door and then something just killed them. That's my assumption, because I don't know how they could have gone against the rule set that was played out for them. That seems like it's absolute with this whole thing. So again, we'll see. I don't know. It's not like I want Joey to die. I just assumed Joey was going to die. So hopefully she survives, and I don't know, maybe hopefully she's not too broken, because the girl, like, there was so much emphasis in this episode about how weak-minded she was. I kind of interesting to see that I got into the fact that she is a B rank, but she never does hard dungeons. And it's because she's just too weak, which makes sense. How much she's constantly, upset over Sung. How could somebody like that? No, okay, the assumption early on was it's Johei likes Sung. It could also have been the fact that she is just pure-hearted. She is just a very nurturing person. And yes, technically a very nurturing person that's very soft-hearted, going into these dungeons and seeing people die is not something that she could handle. So despite the fact that she is very powerful, she can't handle it. And so she is doing weak quests, and yeah, so happened that Sung is weak enough that he's the only person getting hurt in these dungeons, so it hurts her. Outside all this, yes, we did get a brief shot of the sister going to see the mom, which I don't know really what the purpose of any of that was, other than to maybe introduce the sister. Maybe she's going to be important somehow. But it just seemed kind of a waste of time to kind of jump over here and see the sister, and the sister goes off to see the mother that we already knew was in the hospital. The only thing I can think of is the reason for that whole scene was because of the friend or the classmate of the sister. It seemed to imply that she was making some kind of comment about Sung going to these dungeons. I think it seems to be implying the idea that she would do things differently, and thus maybe possibly she's going to awaken to something and maybe possibly be a part of the hunting. Anyways, Great episode. Like I said, a massive, massive improvement from the first episode. Really enjoyed it. I will say that there was a way too much up close shots of characters' faces, which does have me a little concerned as to the quality already kind of showing some sort of rough edges. But whenever the action kind of kicked in, it worked well enough. So yeah, episode 2 has me definitely more excited for the series going forward. I won't say that I'm going to get my hype levels up too much because we're still in that first volume aspect, that idea of like, this is the hook. So it's always the question mark is how well it handles things beyond that introduction to the story and the big hook getting provided, and where it goes with it is really the question mark. That's the longevity that I'm kind of curious about. But anyways, I'm glad despite my negativity in the first episode, this was a lot better. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure that like button down below, comment, let me know what's the episode. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you get my content. I did news, reviews, first impressions, top list if it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate what it does, and y'all take care.